Hello students, today I will teach you Hearts and Hands by O. Henry. This is a short story of the treasure trove of the book of ICSE. Now Hearts and Hands is written by O. Henry. O. Henry is the pen name for William Sidney Porter, who was an American writer, and his short stories are well known for their wit, humor, and the best thing is a surprise ending. So here in the story, just see the chapter. At Denver, there was an influx of passengers into the coaches on the eastbound B&M Express. So at Denver, what was there? There was an influx of passengers. That is, at the place Denver, there was influx, means there were arrival of large number of people, passengers into the coaches on the eastbound B&M Express. So what was the express's name? B&M Express, which was going towards the eastbound. In one coach there sat a very pretty young woman, dressed in elegant taste and surrounded by all the luxurious comforts of an experienced traveller. So in one coach there sat a very pretty young woman who was dressed in elegant taste, means very graceful, decently dressed, and she was surrounded with all the luxurious comforts of a traveller. Now the passengers were coming on the BM Express, and among the newcomers, that is among the passengers, there were the two young men, one of handsome presence with a bold, frank countenance and manner, and the other a ruffled, glum-faced person, heavily built and roughly dressed. The two were handcuffed together. Now the two men, one was a handsome man, he was bold, frank countenance, frank face with frank manners, and the other was a gloomy-faced, he was heavily built, roughly dressed, and he was ruffled, very untidy looking. Now the two were handcuffed together. That is, these two men were chained by the handcuffs. As they passed down the aisle of the coach, the only vacant seat offered was a reversed one facing the attractive young woman. So as they passed down the aisle, that is down the center of the seats, the only vacant seat they could get was on the reverse side of the attractive woman, that is on the opposite side of the attractive woman. Here the linked couple seated themselves. The young woman's glance fell upon them with a distant, swift disinterest. So she did not show any kind of interest, but then her face suddenly gave a lovely smile which brightened her countenance, and a tender pink tinging her rounded cheeks appeared, and she held out a little grey gloved hand, that is her hands which she was wearing a grey gloves. When she spoke, her voice was full, sweet, and deliberate, proclaimed that its owner was accustomed to speak and be heard. So when she spoke, her voice was very full of impact. It was full, sweet, deliberate, means careful, and it proclaimed that its owner, that is the young woman, was accustomed to speak, and she was also heard. Well, Mr. Easton, if you will make me speak first, I suppose I must. So the attractive woman said to the young man of the two, that Mr. Easton, if he wants her to speak first, then let her remind him that he should recognize the old friends, and that was a reminder to him about her happy past spent with him, and she wanted to chat with him. The younger man roused himself. So who is it, Mr. Easton? The younger of the two handcuffed men. He roused himself sharply at the sound of her voice, and that is, he became alert of her voice and seemed to by her voice and seemed to struggle with a slight embarrassment, which he threw off instantly and then clasped her fingers with his left hand. So what did he do? He shook his embarrassment and then he clasped her fingers with his left hand, because Mr. Easton's right hand was cuffed with the left hand of the glum face. "It's Miss Fairchild," he said with a smile. "I'll ask you to excuse the other hand." So the younger of the man of the two, Mr. Easton, introduced her as Miss Fairchild, and he excused himself, for the other hand is otherwise engaged just at present. That is, the other hand was engaged with, that is, it was handcuffed with the other man. He slightly raised his right hand, bound at the wrist by the shining bracelet, to the left one of his companion. So he showed his right hand, which was handcuffed with his companion, and showed it. Now the glad look in the girl's eyes slowly changed to a bewildered horror. So the glad look on the girl's eyes, Miss Fairchild's eyes, it changed into a very full of horror. And why? Because she thought that he must have been involved in some kind of unlawful activity for which he is handcuffed. Now the glow faded from her cheeks. Her lips parted in a vague, relaxing distress. Easton, with a little laugh, as if amused, was about to speak again when the other forestalled him. So Easton was a little amused, and he was about to speak when the other, that is the glum-faced man, forestalled him, that is, prevented him to speak. Because the glum-faced man had been watching the girl's countenance with veiled glances from his keen, shrewd eyes. So all the time the glum-faced man had very keen and shrewd eyes, and with veiled glances, that is, with indirect glances, he was watching the girl's countenance. "You'll excuse me for speaking, miss, but I see you're acquainted with the Marshal here." So what did he do? The glum-faced man introduced the younger man, Mr. Easton, to be the Marshal. "If you'll ask him to speak a word for me when we get to the pen, he'll do it, and it'll make things easier for me there." So he said, the glum-faced man said that if she wishes him to speak a word for the glum-faced man, then Mr. Easton would do when he gets to the pen, that is, when he gets to the prison, and that will make easier for him everything. And then he tells Mrs. Fairchild that he's taking me to Leavenworth prison. It's 7 years for counterfeiting. So the glum-faced man tells that Mr. Easton, who was the Marshal, was taking the glum-faced man to Leavenworth prison for 7 years for how many years of imprisonment? For 7 years. For what cause? For counterfeiting. What is counterfeiting? Forgery, cheating, all these things. "Oh," said the girl with a deep breath and returning color. Then she sighed a relief, and the color returned on her face. "So that is what you are doing out here, a Marshal." So she's very impressed with the position of Mr. Easton, and she gives a very appreciative word to Mr. Easton that he was a Marshal. "My dear Miss Fairchild," said Easton calmly, "I had to do something. Money has a way of taking wings into itself." So Easton further speaks that he had to do something, and money has a way to take wings into itself. So all these are ironical. Actually, he is meaning that he had been doing unlawful things. But what she understands that he is a Marshal and he has been doing his duty about all that. It takes money to keep step with a crowd in Washington. I saw this opening in the West. That is, what did he see? He saw the opening of the post of Marshal, or Marshal. And well, a marshalship isn't quite as high a position as that of ambassador, but so what had he seen? He had seen the position of the Marshal, but then he says that he took the position, but it is not that high position as the position of an ambassador of a state. "The ambassador," said the girl warmly, "doesn't call any more." Now here what the story actually means, that this girl, Miss Fairchild, had left Mr. Easton for an ambassador. So now she says that the ambassador no more calls her, and he need not ever had done so. That is, he should not have been friend with her. You ought to know that. And so now you are one of these dashing Western heroes, and you ride and shoot and go into all kinds of dangers. So now Miss Fairchild, she is very impressed, and she says that now he has become a Marshal, a Western hero who does ride, shoots, and all kinds of dangers he faces. That's different from Washington life. You have been missed from the old crowd. So she reminds him that his position as a marshal is different from the old social circle which he had in Washington. And then she also tells him that he has been missed by the old friends. By the old crowd means by the old group, by the old friends. The girl's eyes, fascinated, went back, widening a little to rest upon the glittering handcuffs. So the girl's eyes also fascinated. She was very attracted, and she saw the glittering handcuffs because she was in the impression that the Mr. Easton was the marshal, and he was actually handcuffed with the convict, that is the glum-faced man. "Don't you worry about them, miss," said the other man. "All marshals handcuff themselves to their prisoners to keep them from getting away." So the the glum-faced man, he clarifies to Miss Fairchild that she hasn't to worry about the handcuffs, because it is the way of the marshals to handcuff themselves with the prisoners so that the prisoners do not run away. Mr. Easton knows his business. Now this line is also ironical, because students, let me explain you that actually the glum-faced man was the marshal, and Mr. Easton was the convict. So he mentions Mr. Easton knows his business, that is, he knows what is his duty of a counterfeiter. He has to go to the Leavenworth prison. "Will we see you again soon in Washington?" So the Miss Fairchild asks that will they soon see him in Washington? Then Mr. Easton very nicely answers, "Not soon, I think," said Miss Easton. "My butterfly days are over, I fear." So Easton, who knew that he cannot be seen soon because he was the convict, and he had to spend the 7 years of imprisonment in Leavenworth prison for counterfeiting, and therefore he won't be seen in Washington soon. "My butterfly days are over, I fear." That is, his butterfly days means his days of freedom are over. But what does she understand? That butterfly days means the days of enjoyment with friends and social circles, what they had, those are over. "I love the West," said the girl irrelevantly. Her eyes were shining softly. She looked away out the car window. Why her eyes were shining softly? Because she was fascinated of the post of Mr. Easton, because she was not understanding actually what was he. She was not that intelligent to understand. So her eyes were shining softly means she was dreaming that she would pair with Mr. Easton again and live in the West with him happily. She looked away out the car window. She began to speak truly and simply, without the gloss of style and manner. "Mama and I spent the summer in Denver. She went home a week ago because father was slightly ill. I could live and be happy in the West." So she says that she has spent the summer in Denver, that is in the West, with Mama. But then she likes to live in the West, and she can live happily there. "I think the air here agrees with me. Money isn't everything, but people always misunderstand things and remain stupid." So she gives this statement that money isn't everything, but people misunderstand with this and remain stupid. But actually, this is again an ironical statement. Ironical statement, you are understanding, students, that on the surface level it has a different meaning, and the readers understand in a different way. The characters speak in a different way. Suppose here, remain stupid. Actually, who is actually stupid? Miss Fairchild is stupid. She has no knowledge that she herself has been fooled by the two men. She doesn't even understand that she is fooled. Who is the marshal and who is the convict? I love the West, Say, Mr. Marshal, growled the glum-faced man. So, say, Mr. Marshal, growled this glum-faced man. So, the glum-faced man said, "This isn't quite fair. I'm needing a drink and haven't had a smoke all day." So, again to stop from further embarrassment, the glum-faced man saves Mr. Easton. He tells him that he wanted to have a smoke and therefore take me in the smoker now. That is, he asks Mr. Easton to take him to the smoker. I am half dead for a pipe, that is for a smoke. The bound travellers rose to their feet, Easton with the same slow smile and on his face. So the bound travellers means the handcuffed travellers, the two men, Mr. Easton and the glum-faced man, rose to their feet and Easton with the same slow smile on his face. "I can't deny a petition for tobacco." So Mr. Easton says that he can't deny a petition means a request for tobacco. It's the one friend of the unfortunate. So he very clearly explains that tobacco is that one friend for the unfortunate. Now students, this is very true because tobacco is a great respite for the unfortunate men like the convicts, because he hints how people rely on tobacco, alcohol if they are in tension or in distress. "Goodbye, Miss Fairchild. Duty calls, you know." He held out his hand for a farewell. "It's too bad you are not going east," she said, reclothing herself with manner and style. "But you must go on to Leavenworth, I suppose." So she is actually very, very impressed with his position, and she understands that since he has the position of a marshal, he has to do the duty and go to Leavenworth. "Yes," said Easton, "I must go to Leavenworth." The two men settled down the aisle into the smoker. That is, the two men means the glum-faced man and Mr. Easton. Settled down means to move. They went sideways to the smoker. The two passengers in a seat nearby had heard most of the conversation. "Now," said one of them, "the marshal's good sort of chap." So one of them said that the marshal is a good sort of chap. "Some of these Western fellows are all right. Pretty young to hold an office like that, isn't he?" So the other answered that the marshal was pretty young to hold such a position. "Young?" exclaimed the first speaker. So he is very astonished at the thinking of that other speaker. He says that, "Young? Oh, why, didn't you catch on? That is, didn't you get it? Say, did you ever know an officer to handcuff a prisoner to his right hand?" So, have you ever seen an officer to handcuff a prisoner on his right hand? So, whose right hand is handcuffed? The convict's right hand is handcuffed, which is Mr. Easton's, and the officer is the glum-faced man whose left hand is handcuffed with the right hand of Mr. Easton. So you see, Mr. Easton is presented as a handsome young man, but he is being taken to Leavenworth prison, and it is very evident, 7 years of it, it is very evident that he must have spent a very ambitious and reckless life, and he is also unwise and is of morally corrupt like Miss Fairchild. So here, and now you see the marshal actually lies to save Mr. Easton from embarrassment, and by this he reveals his human nature of compassion. So the theme of this story is compassion, and the marshal actually also lies to highlight the theme of deception, that appearance is very deceitful. appearance versus the reality of man. Appearance is such, no, we get deceived. It is very, it fools us. So almost everyone present, including Miss Fairchild, was deceived by the two men of the that is the Marshal and Mr. Easton. And then Mr. Easton was actually not the Marshal. Only the passenger in the end gets hold of the catch, and in the very last sentence it is revealed by the common sense and the presence of mind of the first speaker that the actually who is the convict. Mr. Easton is the convict, and the glum-faced man was the Marshal. I hope students, you have understood the story.